The House will please come to order. I'd like to welcome everybody to the 17th day of the session, Tuesday, March 5th, 2024. The reading clerk will please call the roll.
Alaman. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestik. Klauston. Conrad. Excused. Craigo. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Excused. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrop. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stith. Storer. Excused. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washit. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Swanitzer Dan. Swanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers. Conrad. Excused. You leave it open? I have two.
Yeah, reading clerk, let's leave that roll call open for a second. The prayer today will be provided by Sister Sandy Walton, Young Women's President for the Cheyenne East Stake. Please rise.
Our dear, kind, and gracious Heavenly Father, we are so very thankful for the opportunity we are able to meet in this building. We are grateful for the many freedoms we enjoy here on this earth and in this nation. We are thankful for the people who work so diligently to listen to the will of thy people and to serve and to do their best in all their responsibilities. We pray that as we open this session, that there will be peace felt in this building and that those who are working this day, that their hearts and minds will be open to others and that we will be able to feel the peace and be able to make the decisions that are necessary. We pray that thou will continue to watch over and protect us in all that we do and watch over and protect our families and our loved ones and those that are serving so diligently here in our military. And we pray for these things in the name of our Savior Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Sister Walton. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The House will please come to order. Reading clerk, please finish the roll.
Haroldson. Storer. 62 present.
All right, thank you. So just to, well, first of all, I'm going to introduce the doctor of the day, which is Kristen Graff. So please welcome her. Chairman Zwanitzer, do you have a privilege?
I do. I have great privilege, Mr. Speaker, if I could have it.
Please.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are joined by actually the bishop of the United Methodist Church Mountain Sky area, which is Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, Utah. And so she's the bishop over 378 United Methodist churches, and actually the leadership team of that same conference is with us in the North Gallery. So not only do we have Bishop Karen Oliveto, we also have Reverend Mark Calhoun, Reverend Kai Froze, apologies to that of Worland, Reverend Lynn Jackson, Sarah Lattimore, Andrew Bridgman, Stephanie Moffett, and Isaac Dunn. They're some of your leaders of United Methodist Church here in Wyoming in the Mountain Sky area. Please make them all feel welcome.
Welcome to the House. Representative Larson Lloyd, do you have a privilege?
I do, Mr. Chairman. If a privilege of the floor.
Please.
First, I'd just say, Mark, good to see you. Good guy from Lander, does a lot in our community. Feeds the hungry every Friday. Great guy, just does a great job. So, Mr. Speaker, we have representatives above my desk from the nonprofits across the state of us, with us today with over 400 members. They are the State's Association for Charitable Nonprofits. Nonprofits, as you know, are catalysts for our community development and important partners in addressing statewide and local challenges. They're a major contributor to Wyoming's economy with over 16,000 employees, close to 17,000, and 8% of Wyoming's private non-government workforce. Nonprofits partner with government in delivering essential services to our community. They play a vital role in building vibrant and thriving communities. Please welcome members of the Wyoming Nonprofit Network.
Nonprofits of Wyoming, welcome to the House. We really appreciate all of the good things you do, all of the good things you do for the state of Wyoming, and tireless effort. So thank you. Anybody else got a privilege? All right. So Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of March 4th, 2024 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Chestick and Ward.
I drank too much coffee this morning and my throat is dry, so please forgive me. Messages from the Senate.
Message 273. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below failed to pass the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 75, Public Property Amendments. Ayes 15, noes 13, excused 3. Message 278. Mr. Speaker, the Senate appointed Senate conferees to meet with the Light Committee Number 2 from the House on amendments to House Bill 1. The Senate conferees are Senator Nethercott, Chairman, Senator Dockstader, Senator Driscoll, Senator Guru, Senator Jones. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
All right, that's it. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, next we're going to have a series of motions that members want to bring. I think most of them are to move bills from one place to another. And so I think there could be upwards to 4 of them, and then there could be another motion to do something else. So Representative Smith, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to House Rule 5-6, I move the House recall Senate File 102 from Committee Number 2, and pursuant to Mason Sections 491-6, I further move to suspend House Rules 5-4, 6-1, and 6-2, and pursuant to House Rule 10-9, to commit Senate File 102 directly to Committee of the Whole.
Okay. And I think we need the 5, I think that's a 5 seconds thing, is that right, Chief? So I think we got, just write them down. And then, okay, the motion has been seconded by 5 members. Under House Rule 5-6, the motion to recall is debatable as to the advisability of the motion. Under House Rule 10-9, the motion to commit is debatable and amendable. Under House Rule 1-3, the motion to suspend the rules to allow the bill to be referred directly to Committee of the Whole requires a 2/3 vote of the elected members of the House. So I guess so that will be made as one motion. So in the end, it'll be require a 2/3 majority. So I'm going to go with second reading debate rules. So Representative Stiff on Senate File 102, the reason why you would like to move it from committee.
Basically, it's foreign property ownership and critical infrastructure, and this is something that's been going on in Goshen County. And so I just think it's valuable to protect our critical infrastructure.
Representative Larson Lloyd, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Recently read an article about a congressman that we know that pointed out that in Washington, there's oftentimes bills that look really good, but they contain a poison pill, meaning that the contents of the bill, even though the bill title sounds just wonderful, there's contents of the bill that just make it unacceptable. And when we heard this bill last night, there's really concerns on takings, meaning that, for example, that if foreign ownership of a property, once that is determined, they have 4 months to dispose or dissolve or get rid of that property. If they don't do it in the matter of 4 months, and we're talking millions of dollars of resources that could be at play, if they don't get rid of it in 4 months, then the state can come in and auction it off. The proceeds of that sale goes to satisfy creditors. Any leftover, you would think that would go to the owner. No, it goes to the state. They call that takings. There's no place for the fines to go. There's just not some very good avenue for notification. It doesn't address in the event that for example, if you had somebody that had an interest now and whose government was in good standing, but then changed, and they could have millions or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets. Now that their government is on the naughty list, they've got 4 months to dispose of their property. That's just very difficult. The issue is valid, and that's on the Appropriations Committee's interim topic list. But as we addressed and we asked those questions last night of the sponsor of the bill, they just were not answered in a way that they were a poison pill to the bill. And I would encourage that we let this bill come back next year and maybe address some of those concerns that we identified.
Representative Bear, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that this effort is really about getting this bill out of the hands of a very, very busy committee. It's clear from the comments we just heard from a member of that committee that, they're busy, and when there's little details in the bill that they're not satisfied with, there's really not a lot of time to get an amendment in there and get those things fixed before we bring it to the body. I know there wasn't even time to hear testimony from the public on this particular bill. So, this is a good effort, I think, to bring it to this body, this committee, to have a good discussion about it. And the issue itself, my goodness, this is probably going to be one of the top priorities of our citizens in the next 12 months, I would say, as foreign actors are beginning to infiltrate our society and make purchases of properties without our knowledge and without an understanding of what they're going to do with that. Now, there's an executive of another state that's on our southern coast that has taken action on this. I think that there's an ability to see that this can be done and done in a good manner. That case there had a company that had been in business for decades in that state, but it was found that they were a foreign actor that was acting in a contrary way to the safety and security of our citizens. And I think that's what we're talking about here, is securing our state for our citizens. On and for the motion.
I've kind of allowed the back and forth banter on the bill itself, but it's really the debate, even though it's kind of hard to get to, is about whether it should go from one committee to another committee. And so Representative Alaman, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is nothing more than about our safety and our security, both Wyoming and the United States. We have many people who really don't much like us, and they're coming in and they're buying our land by military bases. In California, they're buying them by the shipyards.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
What's your point?
We need to debate the motion. The motion is whether we are pulling a bill from committee and bringing it to the floor for committee of the whole, where we will debate the bill. We are not debating the bill. We're not hearing the merits of the bill in this debate. We are debating whether or not we're going to pull a bill. Thank you.
I agree. Representative Alaman, kind of
Okay.
talk about why we want to move the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry about that. I've had many emails of people wanting me to make sure that this bill gets through, and the way I do that is to put it into a committee who's more favorable to it. Thank you.
Representative Stiff, for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, just to be clear, the committee number 2 did hear testimony from the public. We had at least 6 witnesses, members of the public, not in addition to the sponsor of the bill. We took that testimony. We had actually, I think we devoted more time to debating that bill yesterday than to any other single bill. So I think we follow the process, and there is another bill that's here ready to go that addresses the same issue. So on and against the motion.
Representative Banks, for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And this has been a priority of mine to have these bills. And I think at this point, I'm going to vote to bring it out because I would like to have the discussion. I think this body, if I recall the process right, we are taking it from a committee and putting it directly here to committee of the whole. I'd like to have that discussion. I'd like to get a feel of where the body sits on it, because we do have another ability to go with this going forward. And so for discussion purposes, I would like to get this to the floor and get a feel of where the body sits on it. So I'm going to be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Representative Pinn, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a top priority for a lot of our constituents across the state. I hear about this a lot. People have this concern. If one committee feels like it's not ready for prime time, I might remind the body of what we have been through on at least one bill that made it through the process, ended up with couple dozen amendments. And finally, we decided that it wasn't ready. But I think that that's a decision and a discussion that we need to have on the floor because of the importance of this topic to our constituents. So please be in favor of bringing this to the floor so that we can discuss. Thank you.
Representative Yin for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So members, and maybe the bringer of the motion can help explain to me, from my understanding, appropriations had 3 bills on this topic. They actually voted out 1 bill, and we discussed it on Committee of the Whole yesterday. So if we have an issue of discussing this issue, what was the discussion yesterday? Does that mean we didn't discuss the issue of infrastructure and homeland security yesterday? Because from my understanding, that bill passed with flying colors, and we'll have a chance to debate it even more on second and third reading. What's the point of pulling another bill on the same topic out if we have a bill moving forward now? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Ward for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The public is in support of us hearing this on the floor, and the public was in support of the bill in committee. Thank you.
Representative Slagle for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm in favor of this motion. As 2 speakers ago mentioned, we did have a bill on the floor yesterday, but there was 2 more left in the committee that we're pulling these out of. And some of the one that I will be moving later has to do with the Constitution of our state, which is important. But these bills all kind of work together. And so I would vote in favor of pulling this out of committee. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Excuse me. Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Allemand.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Wyoming way is not to kill it. The Wyoming way is let's bring it to this House floor, an amendment, and make a good bill out of it. That's what we need to do, folks. Thank you.
Anybody else for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to thank the good appropriator for recognizing that the issue is valid. And so let's not wait any longer and let the body decide to move the bill forward by its merits. Please vote aye.
We are now voting on whether to recall Senate File 102 from Committee Number 2 and commit the bill to Committee of the Whole. The Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Clouston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez-Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stiff. Storer. Strzok. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo.
Excused.
Walters. Ward. Washut. I'm sorry, repeat. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 27 aye, 34 no, 1 excused.
The motion to recall Senate File 102 and move it to Committee of the Whole has failed. Representative, I think Ottman, the list I had was Ocean. Would you come up here, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Please go ahead, Representative Ottman.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Rule 5-6, I move the House recall Senate File 120 from Committee Number 7, and pursuant to Mason Section 491-6, I further move to suspend House Rules 5-4, 6-1, and 6-2, and pursuant to House Rule 10-9, to commit Senate File 120 directly to Committee of the Whole.
All right, we'll once again have second reading debate rules. And this would be, let me get my script here. Under House Rule 5-6, the motion to recall must be seconded by 5 members. We're getting that down. The motion has been seconded by 5 members. Under House Rule 5-6, the motion to recall is debatable as to the advisability of the motion. Under House Rule 10-9, the motion to commit is debatable and amendable. Under House Rule 1-3, the motion to suspend the rules to allow the bill to be referred directly to the committee whole requires a 2/3 vote of the elected members of the House. So I think we'll go with second reading debate rules. And so, Chairman Olson, are you at the mic?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I am the chairman of this committee, so I thought it'd be helpful to the body if I explain this bill, and or at least where it's at and why it's at in where it is. So this bill was noticed for a hearing yesterday, and it was on the docket with 4 other bills. It was the last bill on the docket. We ran through the list of bills that we had noticed, and we got to the second to last bill. We worked past the 2 p.m. mark. So we came back to the chamber sometime between 2:15 and 2:30. So we were working past the 2 p.m. mark. When we finished the second to last bill, this bill, Senate File 120, came up, and the sponsor of the bill wasn't even in the room. In fact, the sponsor of the bill wasn't in the room the entire meeting. So had the sponsor of the bill been present, as a chairman, I may have made the decision to, with consultation of that individual, to carry the meeting over into an evening meeting. But the sponsor not even being present, I didn't figure that it would be a good use of the committee's time or staff time to carry that over into the evening, so we just adjourned. And I thought that would be helpful for the body to understand where we were at with that and why that bill is in my drawer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Bear for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do understand that our committees are under a lot of pressure trying to get a lot of things done. In fact, I think it was the fact that the bringer of the bill, the sponsor of the bill, was in a committee himself. He had been chosen for the very issue that we've been brought into session for, and that is to debate and establish a budget for our state. So, you know, I can certainly understand the sponsor of the bill not being able to be there. And I understand that the committee doing its good work was very busy. But this, again, is another issue that the people deserve to hear a debate on in this body. So I think the effort is to bring it to this body for a quick debate, see where we're at. This is an issue that I think is absolutely number one in the hearts of the people of Wyoming. You know, there is a problem with our southern border, and we put money into our budget to help deal with that. And this here is a way to protect our citizens from that problem, and it deserves a debate. On and for the motion.
Anybody else for their first time? Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think this is just a perfect example of how sponsors have to take care of their bills. Chairmen are under a lot of pressure to manage their flow of bills in their committees. And if the sponsors don't do their part, this is what happens. Bills fall off the table. And it's up to sponsors to safeguard their bills before committees. And I just urge a no vote.
Representative Ward for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a co-sponsor on this bill, I apologize for not taking notice that someone needed to be there. It's certainly understandable since the prime sponsor was on the very important committee that's why we're here in this session for. So I apologize for that, but I do think that the reason for this motion is that the body needs to hear this. So thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Rodriguez-Williams for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the motion. As a previous speaker mentioned, this is an important topic. It's important to the people of Wyoming. It's no secret that illegal aliens are invading this country, and driving is a privilege. We need to have the debate on this
Stick
topic.
Just
Thank
stick
you.
to the motion. Thank you. Anybody else for their first time? Representative Knapp.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. While the good chairman is correct, we just flat ran out of time in committee to hear this bill, but we do have time today, and this is part of the process for a bill to come out and be heard by the people and be debated. So on and for the amendment. On and for the motion.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor of the motion? Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank you all. This is exactly why we're here and why this work is so important. A lot of bills and a lot of things have gone on this session, which I've heard in years past have. But once again, this is about a bill. And while it is about driver's licenses, it's also about a form of identification that could be used. And so I asked, it is an important bill. It is important in our counties and in our districts to know and to have the opportunity to know who the people are that are getting IDs and driver licenses in our state and locally. So I would just ask for the debate and to hear this, because then we will be able to do the best work and the work for our districts and where we live. So I thank the chairman of our committee for speaking, because what a load yesterday. But I do ask that we could hear this. We do have time today, and it's the work that we do. So please vote aye on it. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
All right. We're now voting on whether to recall Senate File 120 from Committee Number 7 and commit the bill to Committee of the Whole. The Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Allemande. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Clauston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez-Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stiff. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo, excused. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Ms. Wanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
No.
Are there any changes? Are there any changes? O'Hearn? Aye. To no? Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 25 aye, 36 no, 1 excused.
The motion to recall Senate File 120 from committee and bring to committee of the whole has failed. Representative Slagle, do you have a motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Slagle, please. Sorry about that.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Rule 5-6, I move that the House recall Senate Joint Resolution 2 from Committee Number 2, and pursuant to Mason's Section 491-6, I further move to suspend House Rules 5-4, 6-1, and 6-2, and pursuant to House Rule 10-9 to commit Senate Joint Resolution 2 directly to the Committee of the Whole.
Under House Rule 5-6, that takes 5 seconds. All right, the motion has been seconded by 5 members. Under House Rule 5-6, the motion to recall is debatable as to the advisability of the motion. Under House Rule 10-9, the motion to commit is debatable and amendable. Under House Rule 1-3, the motion to suspend the rules requires a 2/3 vote of the elected members of the House. Representative Slagle, why don't we start off with you?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reason I bring this is because this resolution got sent to our Committee Number 2, which is obviously the committee that has to work the hardest, and has the most bills to see. And I think what this joint resolution does is brings to our attention, to our citizens, the ability to correct our Constitution, to actually deal with resident aliens in a way that we feel is better dealt with than the way our current Constitution exists. And I would urge an aye vote on this motion.
Representative Pendergraft for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we've got here is failure to communicate. And folks, that's what we're paid to do. We have a portion of this body that is asking to have a conversation about issues that our constituents have brought to all of us. When it gets too crowded in one area, we can move it to another portion of the area and actually do that subject justice and have a conversation. So absolutely, I'm an aye on this, and I urge you to do the same.
Representative Larson Lloyd for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This joint resolution was brought in concert with Senate File 102, which was the first motion we talked about here today that was set aside yesterday. They were heard together. They had public comment. We did spend a considerable amount of time talking about that, having conversations with the bill sponsor as well as agency and those of the public. We bring it into committee of the whole. We now then do deny public comment on it. And it's just those of us that are doing it. So I would respectfully ask that you vote no on this proposal.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would just point out that the committee met 3 times yesterday, had plenty of time to work the bills. As we did, we worked the bills. So they've been through the proper vetting, and I would encourage a no vote on this.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the bringer of the motion? Representative Slagle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just urge an aye vote on this motion. As we just heard from the member, our committee number 2 said they had plenty of time to work this bill. I would say if they had plenty of time, then we should have had time to hear from our constituents. And so I would ask for an aye vote on this motion. Thank you.
We are now voting on whether to recall Senate Joint Resolution number 2 from Committee number 2 and commit the bill to Committee of the Whole. The Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Allemand? 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 Repeat. Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermueller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Excused? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers?
No.
Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 25 aye, 36 no, 1 excused.
The motion to recall Senate Joint Resolution 2 from Committee number 2 and commit the bill to Committee of the Whole has failed. The next motion, I believe, is by Representative Ocean. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to House Rule 5-6, I move the House recall Senate File 128 from Committee number 4 and pursuant to Mason's Section 491-6, I further move to suspend House Rules 5-4, 6-1, and 6-2, and pursuant to House Rule 10-9, commit Senate File 128 directly to Committee of the Whole.
All right, Representative, let's get the seconds on that. Under House Rule 5-6, must be seconded by 5 members. The motion has been seconded by 5 members. Under House Rule 5-6, the motion to recall is debatable. As to the advisability of the motion, under House Rule 10-9, the motion to commit is debatable and amendable. Under House Rule 1-3, the motion to suspend the rules requires a 2/3 vote of the elected members of the House. Representative Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill just allows one more charter school in Wyoming. There's communities that need these schools, and I believe this is a good bill and something that the body should have a chance to talk about. Thank you.
All right. Is there anybody else for their first time? All right. We're now voting on whether to recall Senate File 128 from Committee number 4 and commit the bill to Committee of the Whole. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrop? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Excused? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Chadwick? Are there any changes? Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 26 aye, 35 no, 1 excused.
All right. The motion to recall Senate File 128 from Committee Number 4 and commit the bill to Committee of the Whole has failed. Representative Chairman Harshman, you want to try your luck?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, this would be in the joint rules. Recall, Mr. Speaker, I just got to explain what I'm doing. I hope so if I go, okay, Senate File 70 is a committee bill that from Cap Finance, worked on this a couple of years, good chairman here and members on this floor. The bill would enhance returns for two of our permanent funds, Wildlife Trust and the Cultural Resources. And
So
the bill started in the other.
Chairman Harshman, I think you need to talk about what rule you're
Okay,
on
yeah,
so I
we're-
can see whether anything's
Yeah,
debatable.
And I appreciate that correction, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would move then for a request for return of the bill, and that is Joint Rule 19-1. And Mr. Speaker and members, the way this rule works is once that bill leaves the possession of the House, and you'll recall yesterday we had a motion for reconsideration and the good speaker says we don't have the bill anymore. It has already been transported down to the other end. And so our rules and Masons provide for when that happens. And that's really our fault. We should have been on top of that and asked to hang on to that a little bit longer for the reconsideration vote. So the way this rule would work is that same as a reconsideration, and to pass the bill, frankly, it needs 2/3 vote. And then the presiding officer, the good speaker, would send a message to the president. Our colleagues down the hall would have to hold a similar vote, 2/3 to pass it, and send it back to us for a reconsideration vote. And I would just say that the bill has not had one no vote in the entire process till it came to here on third reading. Passed unanimously, the Senate committee, Senate floor on introduction, Senate approval, House committee unanimous, all the way through. Not one no vote until the final vote
Mr. Speaker,
here.
point of order.
So,
Point taken,
Thank you.
Chairman Harshman.
yeah, sorry. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd stand for any questions. I don't think this motion is, I'm not sure if it's debatable. I don't think.
You know, it doesn't say that it's not debatable, so we'll do second reading debate rules. Anybody want to debate this? All right. So, question having been called on the motion, which the motion is 19-1. a motion to return Senate File 70 from the Senate back to the House for the purpose of reconsideration. It requires a 2/3 majority to be adopted. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart? Byron? I'm sorry, repeat. Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Haroldson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Repeat. Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stiff? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Excused? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Are there any changes? O'Hearn? No. To aye. Byron? Aye. To no. Yin? Yin, no. To aye. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 28 aye, 33 no, 1 excused.
The motion to return Senate File 70 from the Senate to the House for the purposes of reconsideration has failed. All right. Briefly, we had former Representative Freeman in the House above, but I don't see him now. That's too bad. Anyway, you're really good guy. So I think we're going into second reading. Oh, yes, is there a privilege of the floor?
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor.
Please.
Members of the House, joining us in the South Gallery today are two first-time visitors to the state of Wyoming. Jennifer Sutton and Stephen Miller are both from New York. Jennifer is the Executive Director of the Council for a Secure America, and Stephen is a research fellow at CSA and a veteran of the Israeli Defense Force. They have traveled all the way out here to brief us on the very difficult situation in Israel and how Wyoming plays a role in that. The briefing is at 1:20 p.m. today in the Capitol Auditorium. I hope you all can make it. Please, let's welcome these folks to the state of Wyoming.
Welcome to the House. It's nice to have people from a long ways away. We are now at that order of business of bills on second reading, and I got to take another drink of water. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 6. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 6, sponsored by Labor, Nursing Home Administrators, Temporary Licenses.
Senate File 6, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 19.
Senate File 19, sponsored by Education, Developmental Preschool Funding.
Senate File 19, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 23.
Senate File 23, sponsored by Corporations, Public Utilities, Energy Resource Procurement.
Senate File 23, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 24.
Senate File 24, sponsored by Corporations, Public Service Commission, Integrated Resource Plans.
Senate File 24, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 26.
Senate File 26, sponsored by Corporations, Special District Vacancies.
Senate File 26, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 27.
Senate File 27, sponsored by Corporations, Special Districts, Bonds, Elections, Exception.
Senate File 27, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 42.
Senate File 42, sponsored by Minerals, Low Carbon, Reliable Energy Standards, Amendments.
Senate File 42, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 52.
Senate File 52, sponsored by Blockchain, Wyoming Stable Token Act, Amendments.
Senate File 52, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 53.
Senate File 53, sponsored by Senator Landon, 6th Judicial District, number of judges.
Senate File 53, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 57.
Senate File 57, sponsored by Senator Furphy, Wyoming Adult Hearing Aid Program.
Senate File 57, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 73.
Senate File 73, sponsored by Senator Barlow, Concealed Firearms Permit Eligibility.
Senate File 73, having been read two separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is, I'm going to wait just a moment before I do 77 that has an amendment. And Chairman Northrop, are you going to take a privilege?
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Speaker and members of the 67th, I'd like to introduce Representative John Freeman. John served on this floor for many years. Give him a warm welcome.
Hear, hear. So Representative Freeman, it's really good to see you. Did you want to say anything, or are you good? Either way. Representative Freeman, welcome back to the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's wonderful to be here. The 10 years that I stayed in here, it was one of the best periods of my life. Just want to tell the Speaker, I told him if he became Speaker, I would come and see him in the chair, and I've delivered on my promise with only a couple days to spare. But everybody do good work and think of the citizens of the state of Wyoming. Thank you.
Hear, hear. When Chairman Northrop and I came in, Representative Freeman was on education, and that was the committee we got appointed to, and I think we all became fast friends. And when I got appointed to appropriations, he gave me one of those stickers that was like a Darth Vader, a stormtrooper sticker, you know, to put on my computer since I had turned to the dark side and went to appropriations. And so, really good to see you, John. Glad you're here. So the next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 77. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 77, sponsored by Senator Nethercott, Homeland Defense, Infrastructure, Reporting and Investigating.
We have an amendment. Representative Zwanitzer Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move first reading amendment to Senate File 77 and ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, what this amendment does, and we heard this in committee, that basically any property that would sell within, originally it was 10 miles and it got put back to 5 miles of any critical infrastructure would be required that the county clerks would give that information to DCI for further investigation. And so what this amendment's attempting to do, in my former life, as a realtor, we had to disclose any information we knew about any property. So as those properties would sell, they would automatically have to go to the county clerk, and then they would have to go ahead and convey them on to the appropriate people. So this amendment just basically says that the property value has to be at a market value of at least 1.5 million. And so my thought process is that if a foreign government is going to come in and spy on us, I mean, they can do that through a rental property or whatever. This kind of puts a bar that they got to be pretty serious, that they got to purchase some substantial property value, you know, to really make a statement. So I would ask for your favorable consideration.
Representative Crago for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, I think it, to be honest, you don't have to spend a lot of money to engage in subterfuge. You could buy a simple piece of property with no infrastructure on it whatsoever and set up your own, and the purchase price would be less. Purchase price could be $50,000, could be $10,000, and then you roll in a building which is not going to show up if this amendment were to pass. It would not be required to be reported, and so I think that sort of takes the purpose out of the bill. I'd ask you to resist the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, I agree with the sentiments of the good country lawyer. And just to add, I don't think the cartel is going to purchase property for 1.5 million. I don't think this bill needs a threshold. And again, it defeats the purpose of the bill. On and against.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Zwanitzer Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And part of my concern is about the real estate value. If you own a property within this radius, or if you own a property next to a dam, to anything that they establish as a critical infrastructure. And what fear does that put in a potential buyer, a normal potential buyer, about buying that property? So with that in mind, I would ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
All those in favor of second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 77 signify by saying aye. All those opposed? No. Second reading amendment number 1 has failed. Senate File 77 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 80. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 80, sponsored by Senator Barlow, Solid Waste Management Definition Amendments.
Senate File 80 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 83.
Senate File 83, sponsored by Management Council, Revisor's Bill.
We have an amendment. Representative Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 83. Ask for your favorable consideration. Again, and my apologies for not being here last night to present this in Committee of the Whole. This is the reviser's bill, and so this was a catch brought to LSO from one of our city attorneys who was reading through our statutes and noticed that the reference in 15-1-119 actually needs to be updated to include the entire Uniform Act, which regulates traffic on highways. And really just the last 6 years, we've added on to that, and this citation didn't encompass the entire act. So again, this really came from our good attorneys as a revision to our laws. It just needs updated. Would be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, ask for your favorable vote.
Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'd like to push back against this, not in concept, but in the reviser's bill. The reviser's bill is there to, we misspell a word, and we change that misspelling. This is a little bit more, this is quite a bit more broad than just a misspelling or a 6 instead of a 7 type of thing in our state statutes. Let me just walk you through what this would add. So, and I believe this should be a bill that would be debated, which might be a good bill. But we are in a reviser's bill to make sure our state statutes, the words are spelled right type of thing. We are going to allow the cities, each municipality throughout Wyoming, to add to their statutes things dealing with child safety restraints, which might not be a bad thing, but safety belt usage, adding a motorcycle safety program within cities, that's gets pretty broad there. Off-road vehicle, recreational vehicle, and then towing services. So the way that the way the highway department does towing services right now is that it's a voluntary rotational list, and this would put that, allow that into every city and throughout the state of Wyoming. I think we're going way too broad here in a reviser's bill. I ask that this be voted down, this amendment, and let's bring it as a bill and then debate that. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the bringer? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this is the reviser's bill. We don't put anything that is actual policy. Everything in here is just correcting statutory references and language resulting from inadvertent errors and omissions. And so from what I understand, we are just amending the reference to the Uniform Act regulating traffic on highways. It's just been expanded, and so now with the new citation, it incorporates that entire act, which we've already been utilizing the entire act, the cities and towns have. That repealer, in case anyone was wondering, there are actually two definitions of the term "this act." So they are repealing the section that doesn't reference the entire act, which now goes through too many screens, Mr. Chairman, but whatever the citation is, through 31-5-1701. And it really is just the entire Uniform Traffic Act. It's been expanded over the years. All of our cities and towns reference it for their laws. It's an omission and it's a correction, and I don't think it's substantive policy, so I'd ask you to vote aye.
All right, all those in favor of second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 83 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 83 has been adopted. Senate File 83 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 90.
Senate File 90, sponsored by Senator Garou, State-Managed Local Government Equity Investment Pool.
We have an amendment. Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I thought a lot about this. I don't think the
maybe you should
concept might
move-
not be bad to allow our,
You need to move that amendment.
I move, thank you. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 90 and ask for your favorable consideration. This bill does allow our government agencies to invest, to pool their money, invest, and seek a return on that. I've had some emails from some people that push back on that a little bit. It's up to this body regarding the concept. But I just thought that one of the little caveats that I think would be a good idea for us to throw into this bill is just requiring that any reports or financial statements, audits that happen within those cities and counties and towns include what they have for their investment. So that it's not just any audits, any financial statements or reports or things that they produce do include that they have this investment of their money as well. So just a little note, I think that some of this might happen anyway, but I think it's a good idea to throw this into our state statutes to just make sure that, say your cemetery district or whatever is throwing money into this pool, just knows that they are required to include what they have in savings, what they have in this investment when they're asked for a report on their financials. I ask for your favorable consideration, and I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Chairman Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I would assume that all of these entities would report now. I mean, this is just an opportunity for them to have a different sort of investment opportunity, but I would assume that now they do that in their reporting. So I'm wondering if this is addressed elsewhere in statute, the reporting requirements, or if we're adding another burden onto our communities. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question for the bringer on why we're bringing this language, and if there was anyone he discussed the language with in the office that oversees our investments, or the person that oversees our investments, or the investment team, or any of our cities, counties, special districts, anyone affected by the bill, the sponsor of the bill. Actually, just if anybody was discussed with before bringing this amendment, or we're just throwing an amendment into a bill that affects, I don't know, $1 billion without any discussion.
Okay, anybody else for their first time on the amendment? Representative Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The way this is worded is somewhat problematic. It refers to financial statements and audits, but audits are done on financial statements, so it's a little unclear what this amendment really trying to do.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Ottman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment, we have noticed throughout this legislative session that there were a lot of different entities that were not able, for one reason or another, to do the reporting in a timely manner. And also with the training, we've adjusted that some because some of them weren't really able to do it or wanting to do it or whatever. So what I would think was that requiring this will get them the education that they need. When you have a municipality that could be investing extra money and there's such a small, it's not like everybody lives in the capital city or the cities to the north. But I would just think that this would be a way to keep them in compliance and to help them do that. So I would vote aye on this.
Representative Byron for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against body, I think that
due to the previous speaker brought up 2 speakers ago, some of the concerns. When we have conflicting language that we vote as body into the Green Book, we end up with potential issues in later sessions. So I really think that we need to look deep and trust that our local municipalities and all the different special districts already are doing this. This is already transparent and once again, on and against.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Hornock for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is just an effort for greater transparency. I think one of the things that may happen is that our cities, counties, special districts might easily report the cash they have on hand, the cash they have in their accounts that they control, but they won't necessarily report the large investment that they have on the side. So in some ways, there could be a situation where, as a result of that lack of transparency, these entities are showing that they are much tighter than they are as far as the amount of money they have to operate. So this is in response to that kind of idea. I think that this will likely be done somewhat, especially I would hope in the audits that they perform on these government agencies. But this makes it clear that that does need to be included, especially when you do have the people in charge of this, where we are sending them through training, and it's easy to say this is one of the requirements when you report anything financially, that you make sure that you also report any investment that you have in this fund that we're setting up for you. I urge your favorable consideration. Thank you.
All those in favor of second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 90 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 90 has failed. Senate File 90 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 96.
Senate File 96, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss, Trusts and Bank Assets and Bankruptcy Clarification.
Senate File 96 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 99.
Senate File 99, sponsored by Senator Bouchard, Chloe's Law, Children Gender Change Prohibition.
We have an amendment. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 99. Ask for your consideration. And this is yet just another attempt to try to find a balance on getting help and services for those who are in need and still get this bill across the finish line. I think we're all aware the bill is going to make it. And I think the majority, if not all of the body, is kind of on the same page that we don't believe there should be surgeries on minors. And I think most of us also agree we don't want our young people to have any type of irreversible harm or damage caused to them before they're the age of majority to make a decision. But I'm hoping we all still kind of agree that there are kids in this state who need services. And whether or not, you believe that kids are transgender or they're confused, regardless of that, some need services, right? Either to talk them out of it, to hold them steady and let them know it's going to be okay, and wait, for their teenage years until they're the age of majority. And so what this amendment really tries to craft, and you can read in the language, it says any non-surgical medically necessary treatment in line with the parental rights, right? So if that minors, and we heard from people in committee on both sides and throughout the years, that there are parents who have done their due diligence, who have spent years talking to their kid's therapist, to psychiatrists, to psychologists, and truly feel it is in the best interest of their kid to continue to get some type of services that are non-surgical and hopefully non-irreversible, that we should as a body say, yeah, that is appropriate. You know, the struggle is real in our teenage population, and there are some times that with parental and medical guidance fully involved, that maybe it's prescriptions, maybe it's psychological meds, maybe it's any number of things to provide some access of services to kids who are struggling with gender dysmorphia. And so I'm trying to still find that balance with this amendment, that we're not doing irreversible surgeries, we're making sure it's medically necessary, but we are going to help those kids through their youth and until they can make a decision. And some of them, you know, might be experiencing dysmorphia that goes away. And with counseling and services, by the time they're the age of majority, they might say, yeah, I'm not ready right at 18. I might want to wait longer. I might want to still figure out what this world's about. And so I think this is hopefully beneficial to the body on both sides of the equation, to continue to help our kids while making sure they don't engage in any life-altering decisions.
Representative Penn for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would urge you all to vote in opposition to this amendment. I think that most of us are familiar enough with the situation in this bill to understand that this amendment virtually guts the meat of the bill. It would, if this were to pass, then we would then be allowing the use of PBAs, the puberty blockers, the cross-sex hormones, the prescriptions. We know that those things are happening in our state, and we know that those things do come with risk, and some of those risks are irreversible. Never before have we seen 14-year-olds with osteoporosis and spinal fractures. 8 other European countries have effectively banned these treatments because they're recognizing that these come with real safety risks. And yet it seems like in this state, we're putting families in a vehicle headed for a brick wall and encouraging them to step on the gas. There is so much more that needs to be known about these before we just push families into this or encourage or allow even. We're talking about minors. Parents are not allowed to harm their children, even if they think they're acting in the best interest. We require or allow government interference when we require parents to put kids in car seats and safety belts. This is a similar circumstance. This is about safety. As far as parents as well, I just wanted to bring up one stat. If you want to read the study, you're welcome to come visit me. 53% of mothers of boys with gender identity disorder have borderline personality disorder. There are other issues that we need to be examining with these children. Please vote against this.
Representative Trujillo for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against this amendment, as a parent, as a grandmother, as a citizen of the community, we love our children. I see children in my neighborhood riding their bikes, playing basketball, enjoying each other's company, and I never see them asking each other what their gender is, because that's not how we're raising our kids. We're raising our kids to be loving, caring citizens. That's what we need to focus on. This amendment goes against the bill, and it's not a medical, it is medical, but it's a mental issue. And we need to get at the root cause of why this is happening, not giving them a pill to solve the problem. That's the problem with our medical society today, is everything is solved with a pill. And if we start our children down the line that this pill will solve their problem, we're causing more harm to them. I ask you guys to vote this amendment down, and let's work on the mental side of this and not promote pills to help our children.
Representative Ward, anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know it was said on this floor that many of you are familiar with what this bill and what this bill does, but I'd like to tell you, you're probably not, right? unless you spent days or weeks or months or years dealing with a kid who's transgender or having a transgender member of your family and seeing what that does and the conversations you have to have with your spouse, with your parents, with your family, with your extended family on who knows and who doesn't and how to talk about these issues, especially in a state like Wyoming, right? Where there's not a lot of open people to listen to how those issues work. And you deal with other parents and other families who've gone through the same thing you have. And why is it my child? And do you want your child to be different or singled out? It's not easy, right? It's not so simple as a legislative bill. There are a lot of needs of a lot of people in the state. And when you're on a committee like Labor Health, you hear a lot of issues, and there's a lot of things we could be improving in the lives of our citizens. And I think this bill it's perfectly appropriate that we don't have any gender surgeries on our minors. But I still think it's appropriate that we have services, we have counseling. It doesn't have to be pills, right? But we can have therapies, and sometimes they're not gender pills. They're other type of psychiatric meds to help our young people cope, because it's getting tougher and tougher out there with social media and what they're dealing with, trying to find their identities. And you all have seen it online, you've heard it, this whole thing, well, if you don't accept me for who I am, maybe, I'll commit suicide. And it's one thing to kind of talk about that and shrug it off, but it's much more different when it's someone you love who says that to you, right? And you're like, well, are they joking or are they not joking? And if they're not joking, you get to put them in a mental hospital for a couple of weeks and have people treat them and work with them. And so I don't think I'm asking anything major in this amendment. I'm just asking there to be care for those minors who are struggling with this. And again, some may make the transition when they're the age of majority, many will not. But to take away all of those services from all of those parents who struggle with this issue, and for whatever reason, it's increasing in our society. I don't know why. I don't know if it's a fad. I think in some ways it might be for some young people, but for many it isn't. So I would appreciate your support of the amendment. Thank you for at least listening to my concerns. And if nothing else, know that there is a struggle in the state for many families who don't want to talk about it. And maybe in 20 years, 20 years ago, nobody wanted to talk about suicide. Hopefully in 20 years, maybe more people feel comfortable talking about the gender is difficult for a lot of our young people in society with all those pressures. But I do appreciate you hearing my concerns, because there are families who struggle with this right here in Wyoming and are going to struggle even more with their kids right now, trying to
Stay on the
explain.
amendment.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, all those in favor of
Point of order.
What's your point?
Mr. Speaker, in accordance with Rule 12-4, I would like to ask for the ayes and noes, please.
All right, we got the seconds. I was in the middle of doing the calling for I need to figure out whether that motion is legit, whether they can do it in the middle of me calling. So, timeout. All right, if the House will come back to order. So Representative Penn, I am going to call that point of order out of order. A point of order is according to Mason's Section 230, purpose of points of order, a point of order is a parliamentary device that is used to require a legislative body to observe its own rules and to follow established parliamentary practice. There's another section of Mason that it's not, you can't do a motion out of a point of order, so. And you can try to overrule my objection. That's the other thing you can do. So in other words, I'm going to rule your point of order and your motion or your observance of that 12-4 is out of order. Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I might speak to overrule the objection, under Rule 12-4, it says when a question is about to be taken, it shall be in order for any two members to call for the recording of the ayes and noes. So I don't know where we go from here.
We were not at that point where you called a point of order. You did not make a motion, and you did not make a motion at the appropriate time. When I called and asked for second, you didn't come to the mic. I went to the last person. That motion is out of order. If you want to overrule my motion, then you make a motion that you would like to overrule the chair.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I withdraw my motion.
Thank you. All right. Now that we're all awake. Okay, so all those in favor of second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 99 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 99 has failed. Yeah, it was called, and I called it failed, but division was called. So all those in favor of second reading amendment number 1, please rise. All right, thank you. All those opposed, please rise. All right, thank you. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 99 has failed. 23 to 37. Senate File 99 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 105.
Senate File 105, sponsored by Senator Larson Dan, Wyoming Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act.
Senate File 105 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 109.
Senate File 109, sponsored by Senator Beitman, Prohibited Red Flag Gun Seizure Act.
We have an amendment. Representative Yen.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 109 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, I sent an email yesterday when this bill was moved over to today for second reading. Ultimately, the concern is this bill amends our current restoration of rights procedure that we passed last year in 2023. That bill created a pathway for nonviolent felons, for state felonies, to get their rights back by getting a certificate that ends up going to the ATF that says the state restored their rights, and then the ATF, there's another section where they respect that the restoration of rights happens on the state level, so that they're able to have their gun rights back. If we pass the bill as written now, I think the concern is we're going to have people become federal felons because they're not going to understand that they don't have their gun rights back. So if you have a state felony and you no longer have this pathway to restore your gun rights on the state level so that the federal law recognizes that you've restored your gun rights, then the issue becomes you're going to assume based on the bill, if we pass the bill as written, that you never lost your gun rights until the feds come to your door and say you're not allowed to own guns and now you become a federal felon. The other part that got repealed in that Section C portion is the good representative that's the chairman of Judiciary brought an amendment last year which made it so that within that period where you no longer have your state gun rights, you'll at least be able to get handled in state court as a misdemeanor and not as another felony. If we, again, leave it as is where that's repealed, you'll always have to go be registered as a federal felon. And I don't think that's something that the body really intended to do. And so this is just an amendment to fix that part of the bill. And with that, I ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Haroldson for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'll be honest that this one has been kind of a confusing one for me, for being 100% honest. Talking to the counterpart that brought that bill from last year for restoration of rights, there was not concern coming through their house on this. They did not feel, they're not interpreting it that way. So there's in some ways a bit of a confusion on the interpretation in how this is looking. So as we've worked on this restoration of rights, the last thing we want to do is add more dirt into that water. And I do believe from talking to those on the other side that this isn't needed. Now, I'll be honest with you, as I look at this, there are still questions. I just want to make sure, obviously, what we're doing is right. But I don't believe that this is needed at this time. And we'll continue to talk. That's where I'll stand on that.
All right, anybody else for their first time? Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we're actually figuring out where to draw the line on this. This amendment takes away the what we have in the bill and moves the line back a ways so that any felon then, whether it's non-violent, whether it's violent, cannot have their gun rights aren't included in this bill anymore. What the bill does currently is set that line at violent felons. So there's a big difference between a non-violent and a violent felon. The bill also includes some caveats with domestic violence and sexual abuse and things like that. So those people are already included in the bill. And where the line that I think, or, it's really up to this body, but where are we going to set that line? Are we going to set the line where anybody that commits a white collar crime that ends up being a felon, such as, this is stuff as much as forgery, writing a bad check, and that's a bad deal. We're not saying that's not good, but it's not necessarily good to completely take away those people's rights to own guns for the rest of their lives. This is where we draw the line. Violent felonies, we can all agree that violent felons should not own guns, and that's where we're drawing the line on this bill. So voting no on this amendment is setting that line at the violent felon position. Thank you.
Representative Crago for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment. This issue is extremely complicated. And I think if any of us pretend it isn't, then we're doing a disservice to this body and to the people of Wyoming. I don't know the right answer, and I think my good colleague over here who knows a lot about firearms would agree that I'm not sure one way or the other. But I can remind us all of the discussion we had last year And the reason, and really I think the heart of the amendment that the good sponsor of the amendments has to do with 68102C. And I know the discussion around that. We had that discussion last year, and the discussion is if we don't have a provision taking that right away, we can't give it back. I don't know the answer, but I also don't want to walk down that path and prevent us from giving that right back to people. We have been doing that. A bunch of people have applied, have received their certificate. By pulling this out right now on a whim, are we going to prevent, and this is the question I have for everybody in this room that knows anything about firearms, because I don't know the answer. And until we do, I'd like to keep that language in our current law. Are we preventing other people from applying, getting their certificate, and getting their firearms back? Because that's what we were trying to do last year. That's what I thought we did. If somebody can show me on a piece of paper, hey, we don't need this, I'm all for it. But I don't know, I don't think anybody can definitively do that. And until they can, I'd like to make sure as many people as possible can get their firearms back. And so I'd urge an aye vote on the amendment. And if somebody between now and tomorrow can convince me otherwise, I'm open for that discussion. But until then, on and for the amendment.
Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the amendment. This is, as the good country lawyer has told us, a complicated area. And every time I read this bill, I'm less certain that I understand exactly which way we're going with some of this stuff. And so there are unintended consequences that can be written into law that wasn't the intent of the sponsor, wasn't the intent of anybody that voted for the bill. But that doesn't matter what our intent was. It's how the courts look at the statute as it's worded and come to conclusions. And I'm hesitant to pass murky, ambiguous law and then subject peace officers to liability for up to $50,000 should they not clearly follow the law. And as far as the good representative from the capital city drawing this line between violent felonies and other felonies, he's absolutely right that nonviolent category includes white-collar criminals and folks like that. But it also includes burglars, people who break into your home and go through your wife's underwear drawer. That's a nonviolent felon. Someone who breaks into your business and steals all your property in the dark of night. That's a nonviolent felon. Someone who sells methamphetamine to your people in your community. That's a nonviolent felon. Someone who traffics in fentanyl. That's a nonviolent felon. Where's the right place to draw the line? I think it's a fair question. But I'm a staunch Second Amendment person. I thought if this bill really spoke precisely to red flag laws as they apply to law-abiding citizens, I'd be on it in a heartbeat. Because for me, pro-gun legislation is about protecting law-abiding citizens from the encroachment of government on their gun rights. I worry that this legislation seems to be improving the gun rights of convicted felons as opposed to protecting the gun rights of law-abiding citizens. I may be wrong in how I'm reading this statute, and I'm open to being corrected. But like I said, every time I read it, I'm less certain. On and for the amendment.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A few comments about some of the things that have been said. This, to me, clears up the bill, frankly. This bill clears up the murky language between, are we giving those rights back to violent felons? Or are we giving those rights back to anybody who committed a felony? This clearly draws the line. To me, that actually clears things up within the bill. And that's a line that we need to decide where we're going to draw. So again, also something that was said, within the bill generally, we are not holding our peace officers accountable. We're holding the agencies accountable. Nothing in this bill says that we go after the peace officers themselves. It talks about going after the agencies that allow or help or aid or provide resources to taking somebody's guns away. We had a situation in Wyoming just recently, fairly recently, where we had somebody who had been convicted of a felon, they got their rights restored, and then the federal agency came in and basically took all their guns away. So are we saying that's going to be okay? Or are we saying, no, that is not okay here in this state? We're going to protect our gun rights, even if those people have committed a crime in the past, but it's a nonviolent crime. And then, we can't really legislate to avoid bad actors. There's going to be bad actors all the time. Somebody who has committed a felony, a nonviolent felony, could easily become either a violent felon or a law-abiding citizen. They have that option. And so how do we legislate? Do we legislate for those people who, to keep them from going to the nonviolent felon? Because criminals are not going to abide by, if a criminal wants to not abide by the law, they're not going to abide by the law, regardless of what we do here today.
Representative Hornock, are you on the amendment? Because I'm kind of lost.
I think so.
Let's try to steer
But I'll
back
get
to
to the
it.
point. Anyway, folks, this is about due process and protecting those people that have committed a felony versus the violent felony. And obviously, we don't want to keep guns in the hands of violent felons. So I ask for your favorable consideration on the bill and a no on this amendment. Thank you.
Anybody else for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Yen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So on why they didn't catch it on the other side, bills move really quickly. I think we all know bills move really quickly. Sometimes one chamber misses things and the other chamber can catch things. This is especially because it's very complicated, because it's about the interaction with federal law and how federal law affects folks who have or don't have gun rights in Wyoming. The department that deals with our correction system actually has a webpage on how many people have had their gun rights restored. It's over 500 people. We are helping people get their gun rights back. Those are nonviolent felons, by the way. That pathway is specifically for nonviolent felons 5 years after that they've completed their sentence. Again, the concern is if you pass the bill as is, unamended, without this amendment, you will be telling nonviolent felons that they are able to get guns. The issue is the federal law will not agree with that, and they will become federal felons. I do not want to make law-abiding people become federal felons because we've passed something that says that we think you have the gun rights back, even though the feds say otherwise. Fix that configuration by saying, we'll take the rights away and then we'll give it back to you, and then you have both your state rights back and your federal rights back. Please pass this amendment, because otherwise we're going to be turning people into federal felons, and I don't want to do that. So please vote for the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, all those in favor of second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 109 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 109 has been adopted. Division having been called, All those in favor, please rise. Thank you. All those opposed, please rise. Less than 35. Second reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 109 has been adopted. Senate File 109 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 114.
Senate File 114, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss, contractor licenses, reciprocal recognition requirements.
Senate File 114 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 123.
Senate File 123, sponsored by Senator Kinski, minor name changes.
Senate File 123 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. The next Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 125.
Senate File 125, sponsored by Senator Driscoll, parimutuel wagering activities amendments.
Senate File 125 having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we just as well break. Just let me check. Are we good? Just break. Break. Yeah, let's 2:30.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand in recess until 2:30 p.m.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned until 2:30 p.m. Committee announcements. Chairman Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, will meet shortly, about if we can get there by 12:30, eat your lunch, and then we will talk about interim topics. And you have an email in your box kind of
Sure.
outlining our plan.
Chairman Northrup.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, Education, will meet Wednesday upon noon recess to talk about interim topics in committee. Those are also on your inbox on your email.
Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 committee announcements here. First and foremost, your Select Committee on School Facilities will meet on Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. to discuss interim topics. That'll actually be downstairs. And then Thursday afternoon at noon recess, your Joint Transportation Committee will be meeting in our normal, it'll be actually PM 6 to discuss interim topics.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Select Committee, Capital Finance and Investments, will meet today on adjournment in Public Meeting Room 5 to discuss interim topics. Thank you.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thanks. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, will meet tomorrow at 8 a.m. in E6 with our colleagues from the other body to discuss interim topics. 8 a.m. E6.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, will meet tomorrow in room 6. And again, that's a change from our normal room to discuss interim topics.
Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Joint Conference Committee on House Bill 1 will be meeting over the noon lunch hour. As soon as we have a chance to grab a bite to eat, we'll be up in the appropriations room resolving the budget differences.
Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I forgot to mention that the meeting is at noon tomorrow.
All right, we stand adjourned. Oh, Chairman, not Chairman, but Representative Obermueller.
The Capital Finance Committee will meet for interim topics tonight on adjournment.
All right. We stand adjourned until 2:30.